welcome back to the Imaginary Gallery. It's TJ, your host. We are rummaging through the Psychopath bag of tricks, referencing Robert D Hare's book, Without Conscience, The Disturbing World of the Psychopaths Among Us, discussing the root of the problem. The next section, Adolescent Behavior Disorders and Psychopathy. Dr. Hare begins discussing the American Psychiatric Association's Bible, they call it, the DSM. Now he's calling it the DSM-4, which means this book's outdated. Currently there's a DSM-5, but either way, it has no category that captures the full flavor of the psychopathic personality in children and in adolescents. Instead, it describes a class of disruptive behavior disorders characterized by behavior that's socially disruptive and that's often more distressing to others than to the people with the disorders. 3 overlapping subcategories are listed. The first one, attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, is characterized by developmentally inappropriate degrees of inattention, impulsiveness, and hyperactivity. Second one, conduct disorder, a persistent pattern of conduct in which the basic rights of others and major age-appropriate societal norms or rules are violated. And the third, oppositional defiant disorder, a pattern of negative, hostile, and defiant behavior without the serious violations of the basic rights of others that are seen in conduct disorder. Dr. Hare says that none of these 3 diagnostic categories quite hits the mark with young psychopaths. Conduct disorder, he says, though, is the closest, but it fails to capture the emotional, cognitive, and interpersonal personality traits, egocentricity, lack of empathy, guilt, and remorse, and so forth, of which are very important to the diagnosis of psychopathy. Most adult psychopaths probably met the criteria for a diagnosis of conduct disorder when they were younger, but the reverse is not true. That is, most children with conduct disorder will not become adult psychopaths, but there is a subcategory of conduct disorder with poor social relatedness, little anxiety, high levels of aggression, and other psychopathic characteristics that is virtually the same as the disorder defined and diagnosed by the psychopathy checklist in adults. More direct evidence of psychopathy in children comes from a recent study, which isn't so recent now, conducted at 2 child guidance clinics. One of them was in Alabama, the other was in California. The children, mostly males aged 6 to 13, had been referred for a variety of emotional learning and behavioral problems. Basing their work on the psychopathy checklist, the researchers, headed by Paul Frick at the University of Alabama, assessed each child for the presence of the personality traits and behaviors described in chapters 3 and 4 of this book. The research teams identified a subgroup of children with much the same pattern of emotional interpersonal features and socially deviant behaviors that characterize the psychopaths. For these researchers, and for countless numbers of bewildered and despairing parents, childhood psychopathy became a stark reality, a difficult challenge, how to respond. Most of the little kids who end up growing up into psychopaths come to the attention of teachers and counselors at a very young age, and it's essential that these professionals understand the nature of the problem that they're facing. If intervention is to have any chance of succeeding, it will have to occur early in childhood. By adolescence, the chances of changing the behavioral patterns of the budding psychopath are very slim. Unfortunately, many of the professionals who deal with these kids do not confront the problem head-on for many reasons. Some, it's purely behavioral, preferring not to treat specific behaviors like aggression, thievery, and so on, rather than a personality disorder with its complex combination of traits and symptoms. Others feel uncomfortable with the potential long-term consequences to the child or adolescent who's diagnosed with a disorder widely believed to be non-treatable. Still, others find it difficult to imagine that the behaviors and symptoms they see in their young clients are not simply exaggerated forms of just normal behavior, the result of inadequate parenting or poor social conditioning, and therefore treatable. All kids are egocentric, deceitful, and manipulative to a degree, a simple matter of immaturity. They argue, much to the dismay of their harried parents who daily must deal with a problem that refuses to go away and even worsens. Hare agrees that it's no light matter to apply a psychological label to a child or to an adult. Perhaps the issue with the most pressing consequences for children is the self-fulfilling prophecy, whereby the kid's been labeled as a troublemaker. He may end up growing up to fit that mold, while others, teachers, parents, and friends, reinforce the process by subtly conveying their negative expectations. Even if the procedures meet accepted scientific standards, no diagnosis is free from error or misapplication by careless or incompetent clinicians. An example he gives is he read a case in which a little girl was diagnosed with schizophrenic disorder by a psychiatrist. It was later confirmed that she was actually being starved by her parents. Once she received proper care, her condition dramatically improved. In hundreds of other known cases, and probably countless unknown ones, incorrect psychiatric diagnoses have had a profound impact on patients' lives. It's not hard to imagine these consequences being compounded if a misdiagnosis means that other treatable problems are overlooked. However, failing to understand that a child has many or most of the personality traits that define psychopathy may doom the parents to unending consultations with school principals, psychiatrists, psychologists, and counselors in a vain attempt to discover what is wrong with their child and with themselves. It may also lead to a succession of inappropriate treatments and interventions, all at a very large financial and emotional cost. If you are uncomfortable applying a formal diagnostic label to young kids, then avoid doing so. However, do not lose sight of the problem, a distinct syndrome of personality traits and behaviors that spells long-term trouble no matter how somebody refers to it. Sounds a lot like don't worry about the specific label of the person. If it's a psychopath or a sociopath or a narcissist, they all fall under the category of toxic. There's a case study next called Jason. Hare recently administered a version of the psychopathy checklist to some young male offenders in a sample ranging in age from 13 to 18. The average score on the checklist was higher than it was for adult male criminal populations, and more than 25% met their criteria for psychopathy. Even more disturbing was that their finding that the offender with one of the highest scores on the checklist was only 13 years old. Jason had been involved in a serious crime, which included breaking and entering, thievery, assaults on younger kids by age 6, with one interesting exception. He was clinically and behaviorally indistinguishable from the violent adult psychopaths that they've studied. The exception was that he was more open and forthright, less guarded and disingenuous about his beliefs and attitudes than other psychopaths typically are. Listening to this boy talk, he says, was frightening. When asked why he committed the crimes that he did, this product of a stable, professional family replied,
"I like it. My blanking parents really freak out when I get in trouble, but I don't give a shit as long as I'm having a good time. Yeah, I've always been wild."
About other people, including its victims, it had this to say,
"You want the truth? They'd screw me if they could, only I get my shots in first."
He liked to rob homeless people, especially faggots, bag ladies, and street kids because, quote,
"They're used to it. They don't whine to the police. One guy I got in a fight with pulled a knife and I took it and I rammed it in his eye. He ran around screaming like a baby. What a jerk."
By the time he started school, he was used to stealing from his parents in local stores and bullying other kids into giving him candy and toys. He was often able to talk his way out of trouble. Quote,
"I just look them straight in the eye and feed them the sheet. It was great. I still do it. My mother bought it for a long time."
There can be no doubt that society is in for a very rough time from Jason and others like him. This is not a youngster whose motivations and behavior are readily understandable. He was not emotionally disturbed. He was not neurologically damaged or a product of a poor social or physical environment. Unfortunately, everybody who works in child guidance clinics, juvenile centers, social agencies, youth detention centers, and the criminal justice system knows someone just like Jason. The questions have remained the same for hundreds of years. Number one, how are we to understand such creatures that are children? And number two, how is society to respond and protect itself while protecting as well the civil rights of these creature children? As the signs of social breakdown grow more insistent, we no longer have a luxury of ignoring the presence of psychopathy in certain kids. Half a century ago, Herbie Cleckley and Robert Lindner warned us that our failure to acknowledge the psychopaths among us had already triggered a social crisis. Today, our social institutions, schools, courts, mental health clinics confront the crisis every day in 1,000 different ways, and the blindfold against the reality of psychopathy is still in place. Our only hope is bringing to bear what we know about the disorder as early as possible. Otherwise, we'll continue applying band-aids to a life-threatening disease, and the social crisis will worsen. Next, we'll be covering crime and violence perpetrated by creature children.
I am the Narcopath. You know what? I think I'm in love. I've got a date tonight. That's right. TJ's gone out of town for some concert. Gold Frap or something like that I've never heard of. I'm not interested. I've got free reign of the house. I snuck a key when he wasn't looking. So I've got myself a date. I met this boy. I met him in New York City. Ooh, cool, kitty. His name is Michael. He better be the one, because I'm getting sick of this. I can't fuck this one up because it seems they always start to spy on me. I'm trying to find the man of my dreams. I just wish they weren't so goddamn nosy. Why do they have to know how I know this man who's hot and looked at me? How do I know this person who acted strange? I don't know, but I'm sick of all this. I want it to work. I want to find a connection with someone. I think he might be the one. Well, I've only talked to him once on the phone, but he saw a picture of my teeth online, and that's all it took to get him interested. That's all it takes, any of them. But I'm sick of spreading my thighs open. I'm over 30 now. I need to settle down, and at this rate, my insides are going to be Grand Central Station 1,000 times over. Oh, and my third eye's already fallen off. Oh.
I mean, it used to be kind of fun, mirroring y'all.
Getting to be a different person every few weeks, sometimes every few hours. But sometimes I just want to settle down. I don't want to have to play these games forever. Of course, if I snare this one, I don't know how I'm going to keep him, because they always seem to do the same thing. I've got to find a way to get him to not look into my history. I mean, I've tried everything. I've faked accidents. I've pretended like I was hurt any time it tried to check up on me, but sometimes I'm not available. I'm afraid it's going to look. And I don't want it to check up on me and find out what I'm really like. Maybe I could find a way to mind control.
I know the CIA does that. MK Ultra.
I'll have to look into that, because I cannot have these people being spies. I do not need to be spied on. I'm fine just how I am. They just need to accept me. He sent me these today. So there. I know I'm going to get this one. I just know it. We'll see.
Show a little more. Show a little less. Add a little smoke. Welcome to Adolescent. Everything you dream of, but never can possess. Nothing's what it seems. Welcome to Adolescent. Oh, everyone is dying. Put your money in my hand. If you got a little extra, give it to the blind. You may not be guilty, but you're ready to confess. Tell me what you need. Welcome to Adolescent.